Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today I want to talk about one of my favorite places that the majority of anglers out there don't fish, and whether it's because they don't recognize how valuable they can be in terms of fishing locations, or they're a little bit intimidating to fish. I'm really not sure, but I can tell you that most anglers are not fishing this type of structure, and I think they're missing the boat. So today I want to talk about one of my favorite pieces of structure to fish year round. It really doesn't matter if it's in the spring, in the winter, in the fall, and that has to do with the fact that it is a great travel migration route. Before I get into this though, I want to let you know that I'm still doing lake breakdowns through fishthemoment.com. So if you want a little bit of help on your local lakes, please check out those lake breakdowns that I do with them. We provide 40 waypoints that are broken down into specific techniques and patterns and locations based on the season of that lake. Very, very helpful if you're looking for some help on some of the lakes that you might be fishing. And some of the spots that I like to mark on those lake breakdowns are saddles. And saddles are the locations that I want to talk about today. A lot of people are not familiar with a saddle, so I'll show you a couple examples here. Generally speaking, the best saddles that you'll identify are where you have either two offshore humps and the saddle is the part that connects those two humps, or sometimes you'll find that you'll have a point coming off, say, a main shoreline that has a hump off the end of it, and there's a saddle that's between that hump and the tip of the point. Now, the saddle, in order for it to have a really good saddle, what you'd like to have are two defined high spots with a low spot in the middle, so a valley in the middle. And generally speaking, the best saddles then will also have steep dropping sides to them. So you'll have very steep sides. You'll have then the high spot of the hump, the high spot of the other hump or the point, with a lower spot between those humps, but it's still going to be higher than the two sides that have much deeper water. Now let's talk about why these are important. The first and foremost, generally speaking, the saddles themselves are some of the best feeding locations that the bass can utilize to actually corral bait fish. What they like to do is have that deep water access where they can swim out, find a ball of shad, and they'll literally push that shad into the walls of the saddle. And with the two high spots, what'll happen is those shad are literally corralled. They're funneled down into the saddle itself that's between the two high spots. So as those bass push the bait fish towards the wall of that saddle, you've got the two high spots, so it's actually like there's less room. And the reason the fish like that is it takes away a lot of the ability of that bait fish to get away from them. So it's a very good ambush location. It's a very good place for predatory fish to corral bait fish, which makes it easier for them to feed. So that's the first and foremost important thing. So anytime you're fishing on a lake that has a good bait fish population, now it could be shad, it could be shiners, it could be Cisco. If you have any form of roaming balls of bait fish, which almost every lake out there has, saddles will come into play. This can even happen with panfish. If you've got big schools of panfish as well, perch, bluegill, things like that, that the game fish can take advantage of. And I will say, this is not just a bass type location. I catch tons of walleye, catch tons of muskie, pike. They all use these types of locations, and that's because it is such a great place for them to feed. So that's the first and foremost number one important thing. The second thing you need to recognize is, generally speaking, the saddles are in travel routes. So if you've got deep water fish that are looking to come towards shallower water, a lot of times they'll find that point or they'll find that hump and they'll follow those contour lines in. And as they're following those contour lines in, they'll come across the saddle. So generally speaking, a lot of your best saddles are going to be in high percentage travel routes. And anytime you're in a travel route, what that means is it's going to be a good location year round. Whether the fish are moving towards spawning locations or moving out of spawning locations towards winter and summer haunts, those fish are going to be swimming by saddles. So from that standpoint, they use them year round. They're great wintering locations. They're great staging locations based on, moving into spawn. It's just kind of dependent more on depth. The really deep ones, generally better in the summer and the winter. The shallower ones are generally better in spring and I would say fall. And by shallow, I mean the high spots of the humps could be a foot of water. You know, it could basically be an island. The deepest ones, a lot of times I'll fish, are all the way down to the point where they top out in 50 foot of water with 100 foot of water around the sides. So don't be afraid of really deep ones. And don't be afraid of really shallow ones either. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the last thing is just how good these places are at creating feeding opportunities, not just based on location, but because of the way they set up, you get a lot of current flow that can position the fish too. So what I mean by that is if you've got those high spots and you have a good wind or actual natural current moving through your body of water, that current flow will get funneled through those areas as well. And as we know, anytime you have good current flow, the fish are going to utilize that as well as a good feeding location. So the saddle itself, based on position in the lake, is almost a natural funnel for current. And that's also another reason that they are so good. Now, when it comes to fishing them, it kind of depends on the depth and where the fish are located. Generally speaking, if the fish are really active, they'll be up more on the point and on the hump itself. When they're a little bit more dormant, they might be right dead smack on the top of the bottom of the saddle itself. And a lot of times your most active fish will actually be off of the saddle looking for those balls of bait fish to corral into the saddle itself. So you can find fish anywhere, and depending on time of year, it can be a big variety of baits, anything from a topwater bait in the summer months all the way down to a dragging bait like a Carolina rig or a blade bait in the winter months. You just want to recognize that they could be almost anywhere in those areas. So don't just pull up and fish, the top of the humps and think that there's no fish there when they might be out deeper. You really want to try to figure out where they're using those, what parts of the saddles that they're using on any given day. Generally speaking, if you have actual current that's coming through the lake, or you've got wind-driven current, the most active fish will be on the upstream side of that saddle. They're trying to take advantage of any of that stuff that's being moved to them. They'll also try to identify where the strongest current is. So a lot of times the strongest current will either be on the sides of the high spots or right on the bottom of the saddle itself if it's not that deep from the surface. So, if the saddle is, if the two humps are, in 2 feet of water, the tops and the bottom of the saddle's in 4 feet, and you have a good wind pushing through there, right where that high spot of the bottom of the saddle, which would be 4 feet, is where you might find some of the strongest current as well. So you need to recognize that the fish can position almost anywhere on those areas. And it really depends on current. It depends on sun position, depends on where the bait fish are. So they are intimidating structures to fish, but it's also usually a very patternable way to fish. So if you can develop where they're setting up on one saddle, generally speaking, they're going to be in that same general position and set up in a really similar manner, on the next saddle over. 2 days later, they might be in a completely different position. They might be, one day they were down deep, one day they were up shallow. So that again is up to the angler. But if you can figure out how to break those down and identify which saddles are going to be the best saddle on any given day, you can have some absolutely amazing fishing. Because a lot of times what you'll find is some saddles will be barren because nothing's going on, no bait fish is around. But when you find a saddle that has a bunch of bait around, has good current flow going by it, you can sit there and catch fish all day long because fish will just keep funneling to that area. Excellent, excellent locations year round. They can be difficult places to break down. You got to do a lot of map study to find the locations, but when you find them, they can really pay off for you. So hopefully this was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow.